you actually want to be more busy because that means you're getting more customers, you're fulfilling more orders, you're building a business, you're hiring people, people are joining your mission. And so I thought, you know what? That's the person we're serving, the person who wants to get more out of life. When people ask me about the rebrand of why we went from Incfile to Bizee, I always tell them it goes back to the Shoe Dog book. I was driving and instead of listening to a podcast, I stumbled upon the audiobook. I've always been a fan of Nike, the history and the story of the company. You know, I thought, I probably know everything that's in the book, but I'll just listen to it anyway. Nike and Phil, over 50 years, built this massive company that transcended the entire world. But when you're reading the book, that success wasn't guaranteed back then. And what I realized in the first few chapters was that this wasn't a company that was set up for success from the beginning. It was just a guy had a real passion for what he wanted to do and a strong belief. Through the trials and tribulations that he went through while I was listening to this book, I just realized I had limited beliefs. And those limited beliefs were actually holding me back. You know, I would ask myself, like, I mean, who do you think you are to think you can build up a successful company? You know, I don't come from generational wealth. I don't have Ivy League education. I don't have the playbook on how to scale a company really big. Those are some of the limiting beliefs that I think I had deep within myself. As I was listening to the book, I'm also realizing through Phil's honest depiction of his own story, you know, on paper, Phil Knight is also not that guy who stacks up to build a global empire. If I wouldn't have listened to this book, I don't think I would have gave myself the permission to think big. You don't need to have all the answers up front. You just gotta have the conviction to keep going forward. So through that experience, I just realized that a rebrand was something that was gonna be pivotal to the future of the business. We needed a name that was gonna be more business-centric. We also wanted to come up with that name before we started brand building. Now came the fun part, figuring out the name. When we look at the name Incfile, that name really served us well for the past 20 years when the industry and consumers thought about incorporating, thought about, you know, needing to get paperwork filed. Looking ahead, there were some limitations with that name too, because we had grown beyond just forming LLCs. We had evolved into something where you can go and get all the different startup services you need when you're starting a business. We've built an entire ecosystem now that supports the entrepreneurial journey. So we needed something that was just going to be synonymous with business. I was putting all my energy in to try to come up with something new that could be a brand that could last the test of time. And man, I tell you, I was going in. I put hours in every day, exercising every ounce of creativity to try to search and find the perfect name. Bizee kept jumping out at me on the list, and I kept hesitating. And I was like, nah, it's like, you know, there's a lot I like about it. But the thing that was like making me hesitate on that name was the fact that you oftentimes hear people say, I'm too busy. How you doing? How you been? Oh, things are good. I'm just really busy. And they say it with a negative connotation. The name Bizee, yes, it does mean you have a lot going on. It's very actionable. You actually want to be more busy because that means you're getting more customers, you're fulfilling more orders, you're building a business, you're hiring people, people are joining your mission. That's the person we're serving, the person who wants to get more out of life. So once I knew the person we were serving, I knew that Bizee was the name. You guys know how hard it is to find a new name. All the good domain names, they're all taken. You guys are out there trying to start stuff as well. So the idea that we're gonna find a .com, that's a 5-letter word that is actionable, like get busy, you just don't find that. One consistent takeaway throughout the book was risk-taking. There was risk every step of the way. It was a huge risk from the beginning just to start Blue Ribbon Sports. It was a huge risk when he had to make his investment to purchase his first order of Onitsuka Tiger shoes to import from Japan when there wasn't even demand for the shoe in the US yet. There was risk involved when Nick and Kyle started the company. There was risk involved when they brought me into the company. You know, they took a big chance on a trailer park kid that had no tech experience, that was coming directly from the music industry, but they took a chance and that was risky. There was also risk when Phil was rebranding from Blue Ribbon Sports to Nike. So these parallels in the book around risk taking really resonated with me because there was huge risk involved with the decision around rebranding from Incfile to Bizee. One of the things that really helped us move forward in that decision was the strong conviction and belief that we had that there needed to be a brand who celebrated all these people around the world who are taking risk, starting their businesses and chasing their dreams. But I'll never forget the time I was bringing this to the attention of my business partner, Nick. I had to drive up for a meeting with Google. I meet up with Nick, and then we carpool to the meeting. He was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and I look over at him, and I said, hey man, kind of a crazy thought here, but I think we should rebrand and change the name of the company. And then he looks at me and says, are you crazy? He was coming from the standpoint that we had already invested $100 million behind the name Incfile. So after the initial shock wore off, we had arrived to the Google building. One of our business associates, shout out to Pat Grady, he threw up a live poll. It went out to an anonymous group of people who were not familiar with anybody in our industry, but were considering starting businesses. And the question to them was, which company would you rather form your LLC with? And so he put up Incfile versus one of our competitor names. Incfile got crushed. It was a landslide victory for this competitor name. And we're just talking names here. It has nothing to do with the service, the company, the people, the product, anything like that. We're just talking brand name here. So then he spins up the test again, and he put Bizee, which at the time didn't exist, against that same competitor, same question, and Bizee beat out that competitor name. That was a very strong signal from the people that Bizee resonated with them. And so in that moment, all the Google execs are around the table, and Nick leans over to me and says, buy the domain. I'm logging on, purchasing the domain right then and there in the meeting. So from that moment forward, Bizee became real. So while we were going through the rebrand, which was about 2.5 years all in, and during that time I would run around and my team would often hear me say, it's 1972. Remember, it's 1972. We're doing this for a reason. But 1972 represented a moment of time in the past. Whereas us being in the 2020s, we could look back and see what Nike became after their rebrand in 1972. If you guys have ever witnessed a rebrand, it's hard from the inside. There are so many moving parts, there's so much tension. Change is hard for everybody. There was times where I questioned the decision. I even wanted to turn around sometimes and just say, you know what, let's just not even go through with this. But every time I was in those moments, I would go back to Shoe Dog and I would say, what would Phil do? And I knew 10 out of 10 times, Phil would just keep going. So that was always a guiding force to help me get through the tough times that came with the rebrand. I don't know if inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs was Phil's motivation for being so honest in the book, but I can say with full conviction that it changed my life forever. On December 1st, 2023, Bizee officially launched, and that became the beginning of a new chapter in our company's history.